last time that we did a cake box video, you guys loved it. So we're doing another one. Stay tuned though, because if you don't have a cake box on hand, or maybe you just don't love the ingredients and maybe you wanna switch it up, I'm gonna teach you how to make the cake box mix at the end of this video. So you can still make all of these recipes without running to the grocery store if you don't happen to have one of these on hand. So it's a great option. Stay tuned. I'm gonna be cutting these recipes down a bit since I am making several of them, and I'm also gonna be taking them to church. We're not gonna be eating all of these, but I wanted to let you know I will have the full recipe posted in the description box. Now, if you're making the full recipe, you actually want to use a sheet pan instead of a baking dish. I'm gonna be using the baking dish just because we're cutting this down, so I need a smaller thing, and I don't have like a half-size baking sheet. So we're using this dish. Sorry, that was loud. I've got parchment in here, and then I just went ahead and sprayed it. We can set that to the side and it'll be ready to go when we need it. Now for this recipe, we're gonna be using half of this box of cake mix, and we're just gonna mix it up in this bowl just like the package suggests. I know there's a bunch of hacks out there for different ways to make your cake mix even better. Feel free to do that. I think that some of them are like use milk instead of water, add an extra egg, or take out an egg. I think there's a whole bunch of different ways you can go about it. So feel free to do whatever you want to do. I am definitely going to be using milk instead of water. We just enjoy that more. So I'm going to be adding 1/2 cup of milk. We need a 1/4 cup of oil, and I have avocado oil, but I always feel like coconut oil just adds this different element of flavor that I love when it comes to a recipe like this. We've got 1/4 cup. Start to combine this just a little bit. Don't judge, I'm just doing this with the knife that I already had out. Once that coconut oil hits that cold milk, it's gonna start to harden back up. It's currently at room temperature. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just heat it just a bit so it doesn't completely harden back up. Maybe the hot versus the cold will come together and make a warm. Okay, before I add this in, it's melted completely now. I am gonna add in 1 egg. Oh, I need to preheat my oven. Preheat to 350 degrees. Okay, so that is combined, looks good. We're gonna start to add in that oil. Feel free to use whatever kind of oil you like. We love coconut oil in cooking, or in baking. I mean, I love it in cooking too, but in baking, man, it is so good. Just adds just a little bit. It's just a hint of flavor. It's not very strong. Okay, we are nice and mixed here. We're gonna pour this into the sheet pan. Really, I should have it go up on the sides too, but I think we're gonna be okay. Let me just spray over here because we'll be able to use a knife around the edges. Yeah. Okay, now we're gonna pour this into the baking dish. And because I am only using half the box, this is gonna work perfect. Okay, so we're just spreading this out in the pan. It kind of did that on its own anyway, but just making sure it's fairly even. I am pulling out a smaller bowl because we need to melt some butter. So I'm gonna melt just about 2 to 2.5 tablespoons of butter. And you guys know, even though these are not proper baking tools, I just genuinely love things like a fork or a spoon. I feel like they're so easy to use. Okay, so a couple tablespoons of melted butter. We are going to add a couple of tablespoons of brown sugar. Let's start with 3 and see how that looks. Mix that a little. I'll go 4. I think that'll be perfect. But if you are doing the full recipe, you're actually going with, maybe it's like a 1/2 cup maybe? I can't remember, but I'll have it posted like I said. And we're gonna add a dash of cinnamon, about a 1/2 tablespoon or so. Okay, we mix that together. Now we're gonna take that cake mixture and just kind of drizzle the brown sugar mixture all over the top. It doesn't have to be pretty because we're actually gonna take a butter knife and swirl it all through there, just kind of making it look a little pretty. You can probably make yours way prettier than mine, to be honest, but I'm just not too concerned about that. Y'all know that typically I am not a huge baker. I love to cook, but I love doing things that are a dash of this and a dash of that. So if it's gonna be a dessert, I'm gonna choose an easy one. Now we're gonna take a butter knife and we're just gonna do a swirling. It's not really a pattern that I'm looking for. I just wanna make sure that we get some all throughout. Looks really pretty. Now, as soon as my oven is preheated to 350 degrees, this is gonna go in for about 15 minutes or so. It might take a little longer because mine might be a little thicker than if it were going on a sheet pan, but I don't think it's that much thicker. So in between 15 and 20 minutes, and then we will finish this one up. Okay, the oven is ready. This is gonna go in and we're going to make the icing while this is in there. Okay, it's a good thing that I am only making a half recipe because my powdered sugar is running really low and I did not pay attention to that at all. We need a half cup of powdered sugar. This is gonna be tough. It's definitely gonna be all of it. I think we're gonna be short by just a smidge. Should be okay. All right, so we've got a little bit of powdered sugar. We wanna add a little bit of vanilla extract. You can also add almond if that's something that you like. You guys know I actually love adding almond extract, but since I'm taking it to church, since I have vanilla extract, I might as well make it with that and then I don't even have to worry about it. And we're really just adding milk until we get to a thin enough consistency that it's like icing. That actually might have been a little too much. Okay, it's a little thinner than I typically like for the icing, but it'll be all right. It'll be all right. You want it kind of this consistency of glue. Mine's a little thicker than, or a little thinner than glue, but it's okay. Now this is just gonna set to the side and as soon as the cake comes out, we're gonna let it cool for about 5 to 10 minutes. Then we'll drizzle with that icing and that's it. It is so simple and easy to make. This cinnamon roll cake, it still has 6 minutes left, but my entire house smells like a cinnamon roll right now. Oh my goodness. I feel like I should have just made the full recipe on this one. I did let this cool for about 10 minutes. I still think it needs to cool a little longer. Oh, nice. Okay, so it is done in the middle. I did check it with a toothpick. Now we're gonna take that icing and just drizzle all over the top. And you know, normally you might want it to be a little thicker than this icing, but again, I'm not a baker. Full disclosure, I tried this cinnamon bread off camera. I just couldn't wait. It is so light and fluffy. I do think it would be a little more dense maybe if you put it on one of those sheet pans, but I personally don't think it's overly sweet. I think it's the perfect amount of sweetness. I really like it. Like I said, super light and fluffy, airy. It feels like you're not eating a ton of stuff. It's very good. For this recipe, we are gonna use a yellow cake mix and we are going to make lemon cheese bars. Now, historically, I have not been a huge fan of lemon things. I know a lot of people are, so I think this one's gonna go off great at church. Obviously, I'll taste them, but there's been a couple things lately. I don't know if I'm just, as I age, I like lemon flavor more. I wonder if I should make the full thing of this. If I'm gonna take it to church, let's make the whole thing. All right, so we are going to be using coconut oil again because you guys know, I just really like coconut oil in baking. We need 1/2. I actually think we're supposed to add the egg first, but we need 1/2 cup of coconut oil. And this is nice and softened. You can melt that all the way if that's what you prefer, or you can use whatever kind of oil you like. We also need to add 1 egg into this mixture. So we're going straight in, 1 egg. Also, yes, I know a lot of you think that that's very risky. I've heard it. It's risky to just put the egg in there and not put it in a bowl first. My mom would get after me if she was here right now too. We're just mixing this together until it gets to kind of a crumbly consistency with the egg in here. Okay, so I've kind of got the egg in there. Now we can add the oil and start to mix that. I feel like I should melt this a little. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna melt it. I didn't even melt it all the way, but it's melted enough. So we're gonna add that oil in and just mix that together until we get that crumbly kind of mixture. You could probably do this with your hands too. Okay, we've got a little bit of dryness there at the bottom, but that's okay. We do need to reserve a 1/2 cup of this mixture for later on. So I'm gonna take a 1/2 cup out. And this was the thing that I had the coconut oil in, so we're good. Now the rest of this is going to go in a 9-inch ungreased baking dish. Ooh, I could have crumbled that a little more, huh? We'll fix that. So we're just gonna pat this in here, creating that cake layer. Kind of pressing, patting, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, just getting that in there. This is going to bake for 15 minutes, and then we are going to work on the topping. It'll go back in after we put the topping on, but let's get this in first. We've got our cream cheese, 1 block of cream cheese, and I think we're gonna need our beater for this. To the softened cream cheese, I'm gonna add 1/3 cup of sugar. I just got so nervous because I looked in the fridge and I could not find the lemon juice, and I'm like, please tell me we didn't get this far. And I'm missing 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, but it was just in the wrong place, so we're okay. You need 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, and feel free to squeeze your own, but I mean, for 1 teaspoon, yeah, we're just gonna use the jar and beat together. Oh, I forgot, we have to add an egg. Okay, so this part is out of the oven. We're gonna take this part and it's gonna go on the top and just pour all over the top. Okay, now we can just spread this around, making sure that we're getting somewhat of an even layer on the top here. And the next thing we wanna do is take that reserved crumble and just crumble it all over the top. And mine is a little less crumbly than I think it could be, but it'll be fine. We're just going to add all over. It's already mixed and everything, so I know it's not gonna be dry. I actually feel like there's a lot more of this topping than I thought there was gonna be, which is fine. It's just not what I expected. Okay, let me wash my hands and we're gonna get this back in the oven. This is gonna bake for 20 more minutes. The oven is still on 350. Then we'll let it cool for a bit and cut it into squares. So you may not wanna cut these as small as I am, but since they're going on kind of like a dessert tray, I'm making them small. The tray is done. Let me cut a couple pieces here of extra for us to try. This is actually really good, but I feel like you could add more lemon to this. So the recipe only called for 1 teaspoon, but I kind of feel like you could go almost a full tablespoon even, because I'm not getting a lot of the lemon. But if you don't like a lot of lemon, this is the way to go. I think that you could just make it more of like a summery dessert by adding more of that, but the flavors are there. I love the texture of it. It's really good. All right, so we just started preheating our oven for this recipe. These were going to be mini peach upside down cakes. However, peaches are not in season when I'm making this video, so we are gonna use blueberries instead. You can go with blueberries, you could go with peaches, nectarines. Okay, I'm going to liberally spray 6 cups. I'm only making a half recipe of this, but feel free to make more. We're just going to take a little small pat of butter and put it in the center of each one of the cups. You basically overall would use about maybe a tablespoon. It's really not a lot for a half recipe, maybe even a little less than that. So just putting those in there. I think it's gonna be really good with blueberries. We actually already tried this recipe with frozen peaches and it does not work with frozen peaches. Don't even try. It doesn't caramelize. It doesn't come out very well. Don't try it. Into each one of these, on top of that butter, I'm gonna sprinkle a half teaspoon of brown sugar. And this is going to hopefully help make that nice like caramelized topping. It's gonna be so good. Now, let me just tell you, the peach ones that we made, we ate them. We just kind of had to all stand around the muffin tin and eat them out of the muffin tin because it didn't come out great. If this works, I will definitely be making them again with peaches once peaches are in season, because I mean, like a peach upside down cake is so good. Okay, so we're just basically putting enough at the bottom to make a layer of blueberries. So I don't have a specified amount. Let's see, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, around 10. That's probably actually a really good amount. I have a single layer basically of blueberries on top of that brown sugar. Let's make the actual cake portion. For the cake portion, you're gonna use either about half of a box of your cake mix, or if you're making the full recipe, you use a full box, or you would use about 1 1/4 cup of your baking mix that you made. I'm gonna melt about 2 tablespoons of butter so that that can go into the cake mixture. Quite melted all the way, but it's good enough to put that in there. I actually only need half an egg because I'm only doing half of this recipe. So we're gonna whisk this together and then attempt just adding half of the egg. I've heard people say before not to use egg white as like your half of the egg. Listen, you can do whatever you want to do, because I have done that many times in the past and it has turned out just fine. I'm gonna attempt half-ish. Oh, okay, that's a little more than half, but it'll be all right. Start the mixing process just ever so slightly. I don't want to over mix this because you don't want it to become too dense. So just a slight mix there. And now we're gonna add buttermilk. Feel free to use water, feel free to use regular milk. It does not have to be buttermilk, but I happen to have this on hand from a different recipe, so this is gonna go in. And we need a 1/4 cup of that. And I'm just gonna add a touch of vanilla extract, about a half teaspoon. If you don't have a box of cake mix and you still wanna make this, you can obviously use the recipe that I'm gonna give you at the end of this video for making up a box of cake mix, but I will also have a recipe posted in the description box where you can just individually add each one of these ingredients rather than having a box of cake mix. All right, I'm gonna add some of this to each one just using a cookie scoop. I think I'm gonna add like maybe 1 1/2 scoops to each. And I also think we're gonna have batter left over. You don't want them to be filled all the way. That's a lesson I learned from the last time that we made these. This is a 1 1/2 tablespoon measurer, and I will have it linked in my description box. We use this thing so often. Oven's ready. These are gonna go in there for in between 25 and 30 minutes. I'm gonna set my timer for 25 and we'll check and make sure that the dough is completely done and that a toothpick comes out clean. If it's not, then we'll let them hang out for another 5 minutes. Okay, I know you guys were not here for take 1 of these, but I'm really hoping that take 2 is gonna work. We're going to just go over the edge of each one of these with a knife, hoping that that's gonna help them come out of this easier. I'm gonna take my wire rack and put that on the top here. I'll flip it over. Okay. Now there's still a little bit in there, but these are way better than the last ones that we made. Oh man, I mean, like the last ones we made, at least half was still inside of the muffin tin. These are really neat looking. I can see where with peaches, this would actually be really beautiful too. All right, my kids are actually at class right now. I think they're gonna be really excited to try these when they get home. Let's taste it. That is so delicious. Whoa. Now I'm wondering how many different kinds of fruits you could make this with. Obviously you could put it like in a 9-inch round pan, but these are so fun to have the little individual ones. There's definitely a caramelization on the top, but I think with peaches you would see it more. Obviously with blueberries, since they're dark, you're not really seeing it, but oh man, these are really good. And it's like a great summer option, a great summer dessert. Here it is. Whipped cream, or your mini cake, a tiny scoop of vanilla ice cream, a little thing of mint on the side to add some green, So beautiful. That would be a high-end dessert. Nobody would know that it came out of a box cake mix. When you're making a cake mix from scratch, you can store it many different ways. You could store it in a gallon Ziploc baggie or a gallon baggie. You could store it in a mason jar. That's a really great way to do it. I have these right here with these just snap close lids, and they're perfect for our pantry. Another thing is if you have these right here, which I store all of our ingredients in, if I had an extra one right now, that's probably what I would store it in. They have these like fresh lock lids, you know, that, what are they called? Flip lock. Now, one thing that I do suggest when I'm doing this is I like to have some sort of strainer or sifter. I guess sifter is actually the proper word. And I like to have this because I cannot stand when you're eating a dessert or you're eating something and then you get a clump of baking soda. It's so gross. So I always like to make sure I sift everything really nicely so that we don't have that issue. So the first thing that we're gonna start with is our flour, and we need 2 1/4 cups of flour. And I like to sift that. You know what? This should probably go in a bowl first with a wider mouth. And then we can transfer it in here now that I've already gotten stuff on the counter. I also like to sift the flour too, because there's always gonna be little clumps of flour, and it's not a big deal, but you see what I'm talking about here? You can see the little clumps of flour. We are going to add 1 1/2 cups of sugar. My sugar is like that pure cane whole sugar, so it doesn't sift super well. The grains are a little thicker, so I don't worry about sifting that portion. So 1 1/2 cups. I don't think this is gonna fit in there. We might need a different container. Yeah, we're gonna use a different one. Add 3 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. 3 1/2. And I will also have the link in the description box to how you make the actual cake. Like once you're done making this and you just maybe have it in your pantry, or maybe you're making it because you want to make a cake right now. I will have the link to what you need, what you add to this, the wet ingredients, so that you can then make the cake. And then just 1 teaspoon of salt. This doesn't really need to be sifted, but it's there, so we might as well. And then I can clean up the huge mess that I've made. Now you definitely can whisk these ingredients together, or you can be like me and you can pour all of it into your storage container. Yeah, that's a better size. And you can shake it up. And there you go. It's probably ingredients that you already have in your pantry. I mean, these are things that we always have on hand. And although a box of cake mix is not very expensive, if it's one of those situations, especially where you find a recipe and you think, I really wanna make that, but I don't wanna run to the grocery store. Another thing is, if you're ingredient conscious, this was what, 3, 4 ingredients? There's a lot more ingredients in the box than there is in the 4 items that we just put into this right here. Our verse today comes from Colossians 3, 23-24. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you need more cake box inspiration, I have another one of those here on my channel. You can click the link above and it will take you straight there. Have a great week.